The wind howled across the Montana plains like a wounded animal, carrying with it the bitter cold of early spring and something far more sinister, the acrid smell of smoke and gunpowder. Sarah Chen, barely 10 years old, pressed her baby brother closer to her chest as she huddled inside the hollowed trunk of the ancient cottonwood tree. Her traditional blue silk qipao, a gift from her mother just weeks ago, was now torn and stained with dirt. The baby, little Wei, only 6 months old, whimpered softly against her shoulder, his tiny fists clutching at the fabric. Through the narrow opening of the tree, Sarah could see them, 3 men on horseback, circling like vultures around the smoldering remains of what had once been her home. The ranch house her parents had built with their own hands, working sunrise to sunset for 5 years, was now nothing but blackened timber and ash. Her mother's carefully tended vegetable garden, the chicken coop her father had constructed, the small barn where their 2 horses had lived, all of it was gone. But worse than the destruction of their home was the memory seared into Sarah's mind. She had watched from her hiding spot in the hayloft as the men had arrived that morning. Her father had been in town selling their cattle, a trip he made once a month. Her mother, Mei Lin, had been hanging laundry when the riders appeared. Sarah remembered how her mother's face had changed when she saw them, the fear that flashed in her eyes, the way her hands had trembled as she slowly set down the basket of wet clothes. The leader of the men, a cruel-faced man with a scar running down his cheek, had dismounted and approached Mei Lin with a piece of paper in his hand. Sarah had been too far away to hear the words, but she understood the gestures. He was showing her mother something official-looking, and her mother was shaking her head, pleading. Then everything had happened so fast. The man had grabbed Mei Lin by the arm, and when she resisted, he had struck her across the face. Sarah had almost cried out, but her mother's eyes had found hers in the barn loft, and Mei Lin had given an almost imperceptible shake of her head. Stay hidden. Stay silent. Her mother had fought. Oh, how she had fought. But 3 grown men against 1 woman weighing barely 100 pounds, the outcome was inevitable. They had bound her hands and thrown her onto a horse. Before they rode away, the scarred man had ordered his companions to torch everything. Make sure there's nothing left for them to come back to, he had said, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. The Chinese Exclusion Act says they got no right being here. We're just doing our civic duty. Sarah had managed to grab Wei from his cradle and escape through the back of the barn just as the flames began to consume it. She had run, her legs burning, her lungs screaming for air, until she reached the old cottonwood tree half a mile from the ranch. It was a place her mother had shown her once, saying, "If anything ever happens, if you're ever in danger, you hide here until your father comes." That had been this morning. Now the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that seemed obscenely beautiful against the backdrop of her destroyed life. Wei had stopped crying hours ago, exhausted and hungry. Sarah herself felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out her insides and left only a shell. She heard hoofbeats and pressed herself deeper into the tree, covering Wei's mouth gently with her hand. Through the opening, she saw a single rider approaching from the direction of town. Her heart leaped. It was her father. But her joy turned to ice as she saw his face. Even from a distance, even in the fading light, she could see the devastation written there. He rode up to the ruins of their home and dismounted slowly, like an old man, though he was only 35. James Chen, he had taken an American name when he arrived from Guangdong province 8 years ago, stood amid the ashes of everything he had built. Sarah watched as he fell to his knees, his shoulders shaking. She wanted to run to him, to feel his strong arms around her, but something held her back. The memory of her mother's warning look, perhaps, or some instinct that told her the danger wasn't over. Then she saw the other rider. A large man on a black horse, approaching from the opposite direction. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was the rancher from the neighboring property, Marcus Blackwood. Everyone in the territory knew Blackwood. He owned more land than anyone else in 3 counties, and he had a reputation for taking what he wanted, one way or another. But as Blackwood drew closer, Sarah saw something unexpected in his weathered face. It wasn't the gloating satisfaction she would have expected if he had been behind this attack. Instead, his blue eyes were hard with anger, his jaw set in a grim line. James Chen looked up as Blackwood dismounted. The 2 men had never been friends. How could they be, when the law itself declared that men like James could never become citizens, could never truly belong? But they had been neighbors, and they had maintained a cautious mutual respect. Blackwood had even helped James negotiate with the bank for his land purchase, back before the exclusion laws had gotten so much worse. "James," Blackwood said, his voice rough. "I came as soon as I heard." "I'm sorry." James's voice, when he spoke, was barely above a whisper. "They took my wife. They burned my home. And for what? Because my skin is the wrong color? Because I came from across the ocean seeking the same dream every man seeks." Blackwood dismounted and walked to where James knelt in the ashes. It was the Davidson gang. Tom Davidson and his brothers. They've been running off every Chinese family in the territory, claiming they're enforcing the Exclusion Act. But it's not about the law, it's about the gold. James looked up sharply. "Gold? You didn't know?" Blackwood's expression darkened. "There's been a strike up in the northern hills. Rich vein, they say. And Davidson knows that mineral rights on your land would include access to that hill range. He's been buying up or forcing out every small rancher between here and there. The fact that you're Chinese just gave him a convenient excuse that the law won't question." James stood slowly, his hands clenching into fists. "My wife. Where would they take her? Probably to Fort Bridger. There's a marshal there who's in Davidson's pocket. They'll claim Mei Lin violated the exclusion laws, get her deported back to China. By the time you could fight it in court, if you even could, she'd be halfway across the Pacific." From her hiding place, Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Her mother, sent away forever? Never to see her children again, never to hold Wei as he took his first steps, never to braid Sarah's hair and tell her stories of the old country? It was unbearable. "I have no legal recourse," James said, his voice breaking. "The law says I cannot testify in court against a white man. I cannot become a citizen. I have no rights here, even after years of hard work, of paying taxes, of being a good neighbor." Blackwood was silent for a long moment, staring at the ruins. When he spoke, his voice was measured but determined. "The law may not give you rights, James, but I've got rights. And I've got men. And I've got a considerable dislike for bullies who hide behind badges and burn down homes with children inside." James's head snapped up. "My children! Sarah and Wei. I came home and they were gone. I thought." His voice broke entirely. "Easy now," Blackwood said. "If they'd been in that house, you'd know it. Your daughter's a smart girl. I've seen her around town. She probably got the baby out and is hiding somewhere safe." Sarah wanted to reveal herself, but something still held her back. She watched as her father called out, his voice echoing across the plains. "Sarah! Wait! It's safe now. Papa is here." But it wasn't safe. Sarah could feel it in her bones. Those men might come back. And if they found her and Wei, they would use the children as leverage against her father, or worse. Her mother had sacrificed herself to save them. Sarah wouldn't let that sacrifice be in vain. Blackwood placed a hand on James's shoulder. "We'll find your children. But first, we need to get your wife back. Davidson and his gang left maybe 4 hours ago. They'll ride hard, but they'll also stop to make camp. Fort Bridger is 2 days' ride. If we leave now, ride through the night, we can catch them before they reach the fort." "We?" James looked at the rancher with disbelief. "I've got 6 good men working my ranch. All of them owe me their loyalty, and not a one of them holds with what Davidson did here. This isn't about Chinese or white, James. This is about right and wrong. And what happened here today was wrong." James straightened his shoulders, and Sarah saw something change in her father's posture. The defeated man who had knelt in the ashes was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone dangerous. "If we do this," James said quietly, "we'll be outside the law. Davidson has a federal warrant for my wife's arrest. If we take her by force, then we'll be outlaws," Blackwood finished. "I know what I'm signing up for, James. Question is, are you ready to fight for your family, even if it means you can never come back here?" Sarah held her breath. She saw her father look around at the remains of their home, at the land he had worked so hard to make his own, at the dream that had turned to ashes. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. I'll fight. For Mei Lin. For my children. I'll burn the world down if I have to. Blackwood allowed himself a grim smile. Good. That's the spirit we'll need. Now, my ranch is an hour's ride west. We'll gather supplies and men there. But first, we need to find your children. They couldn't have gone far, and your daughter would want to stay close enough to see what happened here. James cupped his hands around his mouth and called again, louder this time. Sarah! I know you're scared, but I need you to be brave now. I need to know you and your brother are safe. Sarah felt the words pierce her heart. Her father needed her. But more than that, he needed to go save her mother. And he couldn't do that if he was worried about searching for his children. She understood what she had to do. Taking a deep breath, she whispered a prayer her mother had taught her, kissed Wei's forehead, and called out in her clearest voice, Papa! We're here! In the old tree! The relief on her father's face as he ran toward the cottonwood was almost enough to make Sarah forget the horrors of the day. He pulled her and Wei from the hollow trunk and held them both so tightly Sarah could barely breathe. She felt his tears on her hair, felt his whole body shaking. My brave girl, he murmured. My brave, brave girl. You saved your brother. Papa, those men took Mama, Sarah said, her voice breaking. They said they would send her away forever. Papa, we have to get her back. James pulled back and looked into his daughter's eyes. I will get her back, Sarah. I promise you. But I need you to do something very difficult. Can you be brave a little longer? Sarah nodded, even though she was afraid of what he would say next. Mr. Blackwood's wife, Mrs. Martha, she's a good woman. You and Wei will go stay with them while we ride after your mother. Mrs. Martha will keep you safe, give you food and a warm bed. No. Sarah clutched at her father's shirt. I want to come with you. I want to help get Mama back. James shook his head gently. This is how you help. By keeping Wei safe. Your mother gave up her freedom to protect you both. Don't let that sacrifice be wasted. Stay hidden, stay safe, and wait for us to return. Sarah looked into her father's eyes and saw the determination there, the cold fury that promised he would move heaven and earth to bring her mother home. She had never seen this side of him before, the dangerous man beneath the gentle farmer. It frightened her, but it also gave her hope. Promise me you'll bring her back, Sarah whispered. I promise, James said. Even if I have to tear down that fort stone by stone. Blackwood cleared his throat. We need to ride. Every minute we wait gives them more distance. As her father lifted her onto Blackwood's horse, Sarah looked back at the ruins of her home one last time. The sun had nearly set now, and the ashes glowed faintly in the twilight. Everything they had built was gone, but her family was still alive, still fighting. Papa, she called as he mounted his own horse. When you find those men, the ones who took Mama and burned our home, she paused, surprised by the hardness in her own voice. Make them pay for what they did. James met his daughter's eyes, and for a moment, she saw an answering hardness there, a promise of retribution that needed no words. Then he nodded once and turned his horse toward the west, toward Blackwood's ranch, toward the gathering of men who would ride through the night on a rescue mission that would either save a family or destroy them all. As they rode through the darkness, Sarah held Wei close and whispered into the wind, Hold on, Mama. Papa is coming for you. And God help anyone who stands in his way. Behind them, the ashes of their home slowly cooled, but the fire of vengeance had only just been lit. The Davidson gang had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed that the law's protection would be enough, that a Chinese immigrant would simply accept his fate and disappear. They had never considered that sometimes, when a man has nothing left to lose, he becomes the most dangerous creature on earth. And they had certainly never considered that Marcus Blackwood, a man with all the legal rights they lacked, might decide that justice was more important than law. The hunt had begun, and before it ended, the Montana Territory would learn that some bonds, family, honor, righteousness, transcend the barriers men try to build between each other. The rancher had vowed revenge, and in the American West, Such vows were written in blood and kept at any cost.